Imagine a man stands in a courtroom, looks a judge in the eye, and says, "You work for us." Then adds, "Remember who pays the taxes." Morning docket in Providence moves like a careful metronome, papers slid, names called, a ceiling vents patient hum. Judge Caprio reads through routine citations when the doors open and Money walks in wearing a navy suit. Richard Hale, mid-50s, that polished grin developers practice in mirrors, takes his place as if the floor were poured for him. "Mr. Hale," Caprio says, mild as steam. "Hydrant zone. $120. Do you understand the charge?" "I didn't plan to be here," Hale replies, voice cool enough to chill glass. "I parked for a minute. I keep this city afloat. I think that more than covers a hydrant." A ripple of laughter schemes the benches, the kind that hopes it's safe. Caprio doesn't smile. "The law is the same for everyone," he says. "Oh, I've heard that," Hale answers, hands spreading like an investor's slide deck. "But we both know rooms like this don't exist without people like me." Silence stiffens. Caprio's eyes lift and hold. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, sir, you work for us. We, taxpayers, employers, carry this town. Sometimes you should remember who signs the checks." The gallery breaks into whispers, a throat clears like thunder. Caprio raises one palm and the sound drops out of the air. "Then today," he says, "we won't talk about parking. We'll talk about the boundaries of respect." He pauses, then, rarely, deliberately, announces, "Recess. 5 minutes." It's the first surprise. Caprio leaves the bench, steps down from the height of the robe, and sits beside Hale at the defense table, eye to eye, shoe to shoe. The room leans forward as if the walls have ears. "Let's speak as people," he says quietly. "Do you truly believe your money buys you permission to ignore what protects everyone else?" Hale's smile thins. "I believe my money buys me options." The words hang like smoke. Cameras don't click, even phones forget themselves. A janitor in the back crosses his arms, a young mother squeezes her purse and doesn't look away. Caprio studies the man's face the way a carpenter looks at a beam, checking for cracks the paint tries to hide. "Options," he repeats, soft enough to cut. "Today your option is to learn." He stands, returns to the bench, and the room inhales again. The gavel doesn't fall. It doesn't need to. "Proceed," Caprio says, tone level, edges sharpened. Mr. Hale claims his contributions excuse his choices. This court will determine whether his contributions include decency. Hale straightens, bringing the grin back like a shield. The shield looks thinner than when he walked in. From the gallery, the faint ping of a phone silenced, the rustle of a citation folded shut, a city waiting to see if money can still talk when respect begins to speak. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Rich men like to say they built this city. But sometimes they forget a city isn't made of concrete, it's made of people. Caprio's voice is measured, almost gentle, but the words slice clean. He looks over the rim of his glasses. "Tell me, Mr. Hale, what is it you do for Providence?" "I'm a developer," Hale replies, confidence returning like an old friend. "Housing, schools, shopping centers. I even funded part of this courthouse's renovation." "You sound proud," Caprio says, flipping through papers. "I should be. 300 employees. Dozens of projects. Millions in taxes paid. I'm not just a citizen, Judge, I'm the infrastructure that keeps this city standing." There's a murmur in the gallery, the kind that always follows entitlement said too loudly. Caprio doesn't react. He lets the words hang, heavy as humidity. "And you believe," Caprio says quietly, "that makes you, what? Untouchable?" Hale's laugh is short, dismissive. "Not untouchable. Indispensable." Caprio studies him for a moment, expression unreadable. "You know," he says finally, the most dangerous illusion in a democracy is when a man thinks he's more necessary than the truth. The courtroom air tightens. Hale crosses his arms, leans back, as if the chair itself should defer to him. Caprio sets the file aside. You say you build. So tell me, how many of those who work for you can afford the apartments you build? Hale blinks, caught off guard. That's not how business works, Judge. Maybe not, Caprio replies softly. But it's how community works. Laughter, nervous, subdued, ripples through the benches. Hale straightens, voice sharpening. I'm not here for a sermon. I'm here for a parking ticket. Then let's make it simple, Caprio says. Do you admit you parked illegally? I said I was there for a minute. Answer the question. A long pause. Then, with visible irritation, fine. Yes. But I've done more for this city than anyone sitting here. Caprio nods once. And yet, here you sit, like everyone else. The sound of a pen clicking echoes. Then, from the back of the room, a low voice, that man owes me 3 weeks' pay. The words are so soft they almost vanish. But Caprio hears them. He looks up. Who said that? A janitor in a worn blue uniform hesitates, eyes down. I did, Your Honor. Come forward, Caprio says. The man approaches the microphone. His hands shake slightly as he speaks. I worked construction on one of his sites. When the project ended, he let half the crew go. Said the budget was tight. Promised we'd get paid later. He pauses. We never did. Hale scoffs. Irrelevant. He signed a contractor's agreement. I don't handle payroll. Caprio leans back. That true? The janitor nods. His site manager said the order came from Mr. Hale himself. The gallery stirs. One woman whispers, he's been doing this for years. Caprio raises his hand for silence. This is still a courtroom, he says firmly. Then he turns back to Hale. Do you wish to respond? I told you, it's not related to this case, Hale snaps. On the contrary, Caprio replies, voice steady. It's entirely related. Because what we're really examining isn't a fine. It's your sense of accountability. The judge's tone doesn't rise, but the room feels warmer somehow, like sunlight before a storm. I don't care how many buildings you've raised, Caprio continues. If you build without conscience, you're not developing a city, you're hollowing it out. Hale's jaw tightens. You don't know what it's like to run an empire. Caprio studies him, then speaks quietly, you call it an empire. I call it a mirror. And you're terrified of what you see in it. The janitor lowers his eyes, steps back. The judge gives him a nod, an unspoken thank you, and turns again to Hale. You said earlier that I work for you, Caprio says, voice calm, but every word lands like weight on stone. Let me remind you, Mr. Hale, I don't work for you. I work for the law, and for people like him. The silence that follows feels electric, as though even the air is holding its breath. Hale doesn't answer. For the first time, he seems smaller than his suit. Caprio reaches for his pen again. Proceed, he says, breaking the quiet. The court will determine not just whether a hydrant was blocked, but whether arrogance now counts as a civic contribution. The audience doesn't clap, but the stillness carries applause of its own. A few glances exchange, a few nods, small, wordless affirmations that maybe, just maybe, fairness hasn't gone out of fashion yet. Caprio straightens his papers, voice soft again but edged with steel. You said you built this city, Mr. Hale. The question is, did you ever build anything inside yourself? Sometimes the truth doesn't surface when you search for it, it slips out when someone talks too much. The words fall almost like a whisper, yet every ear in the courtroom catches them. Caprio sits back, hands folded, calm returning to his face like the tide returning to shore. The tension has shifted, the judge is no longer chasing the story, he's letting it come to him. He turns another page in the case file. Mr. Hale, he begins evenly, earlier you mentioned your company's generosity toward our schools. Hale nods quickly, eager to find firmer ground. Of course. I believe in giving back. I've donated hundreds of thousands. There's even a plaque with my name on it at Lincoln Elementary. Impressive, Caprio says, adjusting his glasses. And those donations, were they purely voluntary? Hale frowns. What are you implying? I'm not implying. I'm asking. Did you receive any incentives? Hale smirks. Tax deductions, naturally. Standard practice. Every philanthropist does it. The courtroom rustles faintly. Caprio signals to the clerk, who quietly retrieves a folder from the back. She walks forward, places it on the judge's desk. He flips through a few pages. His voice, when it returns, is soft, but carries the gravity of something heavier. It says here, he begins, that your company made a donation to Lincoln Elementary 2 weeks after the city rescinded your zoning fine for an unpermitted construction site, conveniently located across the street from that same school. The room tightens. Hale leans forward. That's a coincidence. Caprio doesn't look up. Of course, he says mildly. Except I see 6 more of these coincidences. A low murmur rolls through the gallery. Hale's attorney shifts uncomfortably, trying to stand, but Caprio lifts one hand and the movement freezes. Sit down, he says without raising his tone. We're still talking. Caprio closes the folder, sets it aside. You said earlier that you support the city, he says. It appears you also purchase its silence. Hale's smile fades. You don't know what you're talking about. The judge leans forward, eyes calm but unblinking. Mr. Hale, I've sat in this chair for 30 years. I've seen men who stole because they were hungry. I've seen women who lied because they were scared. But arrogance is theft of a different kind. It robs the truth of air. Hale shifts in his seat, jaw clenched. You're making this personal. It is personal, Caprio replies. You parked where lives depend on access, and you stand here convinced the city owes you gratitude. The silence deepens, even the clock on the wall seems to hold its tick. Caprio nods toward the clerk again. Pull up the footage from the hydrant zone, please. The monitor flickers to life. The grainy video shows Hale's black Mercedes stopping inches from the red curb, the door opening, his figure stepping out with a phone pressed to his ear. A fire truck appears seconds later, slowing awkwardly, horn blaring. You remember that day? Caprio asks. Hale hesitates. Barely. I do, Caprio says. Because the driver of that truck wrote a letter to this court. He said his delay was 30 seconds. He also said that 30 seconds could be the difference between a fire contained and a tragedy. The gallery doesn't move. Caprio continues, voice measured, almost sorrowful. You see, Mr. Hale, it's not about a hydrant. It's about what kind of man blocks one, and why he thinks he can. Hale's hands tighten around the edge of the table. You're turning a citation into a morality play. Perhaps, Caprio says, standing now, slow and deliberate. But morality, unlike money, doesn't depreciate. And every city needs at least one courtroom where it's still spoken aloud. The judge takes a long breath, looking out over the crowd, then back at Hale. You told me this court works for you. I disagree. This court works for every soul who can't afford your kind of influence. Hale leans forward, voice trembling with anger. You're out of line. Caprio sets his glasses on the desk. His tone never wavers. No, Mr. Hale. I'm exactly on it. For a full 10 seconds, no one moves. The sound that finally breaks the stillness isn't applause, it's something smaller, a collective exhale. Relief, admiration, disbelief, all at once. Caprio sits again. This hearing will continue, he says quietly. But from now on, we're not discussing parking fees. We're discussing integrity. And in that moment, the courtroom feels less like a municipal chamber and more like a mirror, one that refuses to lie, no matter who's standing in front of it. There's a line even the richest man eventually sees, when he realizes that everything can be bought except respect. The courtroom door creaks open as Judge Caprio returns from the recess. His steps are unhurried, deliberate. The room, once humming with whispers, stills as though gravity itself has deepened. He takes his seat, eyes scanning the room, not searching, but measuring. "We'll continue," he says evenly. But this is no longer about a ticket. It's about a principle. Hale shifts in his chair. The confidence that once filled his posture now feels rehearsed. "Judge, this has gone far enough. I have work to do." Caprio nods slightly. "I'm sure you do. But you'll stay. Because today, work looks a lot like consequence." A ripple of tension passes through the benches. Hale exhales through his nose, that familiar half-laugh meant to signal control. "You're making a spectacle out of nothing." Caprio tilts his head. "No, Mr. Hale. I'm giving nothing the dignity of truth." He turns to the clerk. "Please play the video that was sent to the court this morning." The lights dim slightly as the monitor flickers to life. What appears isn't the parking footage everyone expects, it's a grainy cell phone video, timestamped 2 weeks earlier. The room watches as Hale, visibly intoxicated, argues with a uniformed officer outside a downtown restaurant. On the screen, his voice slurs, "You work for me. You wear that badge because I pay for it." The courtroom freezes. No coughs, no movement, just the echo of Hale's drunken certainty spilling through the speakers. Caprio doesn't speak. He lets silence do the work. It stretches, sharp as glass, until Hale finally bursts. "You can't show that. That's private property, someone stole that video." The judge's voice is soft, but it lands like stone. "Respect, Mr. Hale, is private too. But you made that public." Hale stands halfway, then sits again, jaw flexing. His lawyer whispers something, but Caprio's gaze holds them both in place. "Do you see what happens," the judge says, "when power forgets humility? It begins to mistake fear for respect." The audience breathes as one, slow, collective, uncertain. Caprio looks back at the frozen frame on the screen, Hale's face twisted in arrogance, one hand jabbing at the officer's chest. "You wanted this city to see who you are," Caprio continues. "Now it has." Hale's knuckles whiten. "You're humiliating me." "No," Caprio replies. "You did that yourself. I'm merely holding the mirror steady." The gavel doesn't strike. It doesn't need to. The sound of quiet shame fills the room more effectively than any blow of wood on wood. The judge straightens, tone measured once more. "The man on that screen is angry because his money couldn't buy obedience. And now, standing here, you're angry for the same reason." Hale looks away, jaw trembling. Caprio's final line cuts through the still air like a whisper that everyone somehow hears, "You think wealth is armor. But today, it's the weight dragging you down." He turns off the monitor, the screen going black. The reflection of Hale's own face flickers for half a second before vanishing completely. The silence that follows feels alive, dense, unbroken, sacred. Even the courtroom clock seems to pause, unwilling to intrude on the moment when arrogance finally meets consequence. To see a man's true face, you only need to remove the mask of politeness. The lights rise again. Judge Caprio sits motionless for a long moment, the silence stretching like a drawn breath. Then he looks to the side. "Clerk, bring me the new documents from the audit division." A young officer steps forward, handing him a thin folder sealed with an evidence tag. Caprio opens it carefully. His brow lowers, but his tone remains calm. "Mr. Hale, you mentioned your generosity, your donations to schools, hospitals, community programs. I commend philanthropy. But tell me, do you recall these particular contributions?" He lifts a page and reads the first line aloud. Donation of $50,000 to the Future Scholars Fund, made the same day your company received approval to build near the Lincoln Elementary property. Hale's jaw tightens. Coincidence? Caprio turns another page. Another contribution. Community Care Initiative, dated 2 weeks after your zoning fine was dismissed. That's just timing, Hale insists. The judge looks up, eyes narrowing slightly. 6 coincidences in a row. Statistically remarkable. Morally, predictable. Murmurs ripple across the gallery. Hale's lawyer rises, ready to object, but Caprio lifts one finger, quietly, decisively, and the room stills. Then a woman's voice breaks the hush. Your Honor. Everyone turns. A middle-aged woman, wearing a simple gray coat, stands from the back row. Her voice trembles, but there's resolve in it. I used to work for Mr. Hale. 10 years in his accounting department. Caprio studies her. State your name, please. Linda Morgan. Go on, Ms. Morgan. She swallows hard. Everyone in that office knew what those donations were. They weren't charity, they were transactions. We called them signing gifts. It was his way of making sure approvals went through quietly. But no one dared to say anything. The courtroom falls still again. Hale's face reddens. He laughs, sharp and hollow. She was fired for stealing documents. She's lying to save herself. Linda's voice breaks but doesn't falter. I was fired because I asked questions. Caprio's gaze doesn't leave Hale. No one will be insulted in my courtroom. You're not in your boardroom now, Mr. Hale. The words land like quiet thunder. Caprio turns slightly, addressing the audience, his voice low but resonant. Do we not have the right to expect honesty, even from those who can afford to ignore it? Applause begins, soft, hesitant, then swelling until the chamber hums with restrained emotion. Caprio lifts his hand, signaling for calm, but for a fleeting instant, the faintest emotion flickers behind his composed face. He exhales. Order, please. The noise subsides, but something irreversible has shifted. The hierarchy of the room, the invisible line separating wealth and conscience, has begun to crumble. Caprio looks back at Hale. You built towers, Mr. Hale. But everything built without integrity eventually collapses. You've mistaken control for respect. They're not the same. Hale doesn't answer. His confidence has thinned to silence, his stare hollow, searching for the ground beneath him. Caprio's tone softens, almost reflective. I've met men who broke laws out of desperation. They came here remorseful, frightened. But you broke trust out of convenience. That's far harder to repair. He closes the folder and places it aside. We'll continue, he says. But understand this, Mr. Hale, truth is patient. It waits behind every lie, and when it arrives, it doesn't knock. No one moves. The only sound is the faint shuffle of papers as the judge gathers his notes, his expression unreadable. Outside, thunder rolls faintly in the distance, like the world itself acknowledging that a storm, long overdue, is finally approaching. There are moments when truth speaks so loudly that even those who never meant to hear it must fall silent. The air in the courtroom feels heavier now, dense with something unspoken. Hale sits rigid, his confidence stripped down to raw defiance. His fingers tap against the table, a nervous rhythm that betrays what his face tries to hide. Your Honor, he blurts out, his voice breaking the silence. You don't understand who I am. I've done more for this city than anyone in this room. Half the buildings around you exist because of me. Caprio rises slowly. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His calm fills the space like gravity. I know exactly who you are, Mr. Hale. The pause that follows stretches, measured, deliberate. Then Caprio's voice, low but clear, you're a man who mistook influence for virtue. Who believed respect could be bought like concrete, poured, shaped, and owned. But here's the difference between you and the people sitting behind you: they pay their fines because they understand that rules exist for everyone. You pay to avoid them. The words hit like the quiet toll of a bell. No anger, no theatrics, just truth, laid bare. Hale's jaw tightens. You think this changes anything? I'll still be building when this city forgets your name. Caprio tilts his head slightly. Then make sure what you build can survive the weight of your own arrogance. The audience exhales, slow, collective, like the room itself had been holding its breath. Someone claps once, sharply. Then another joins. Within seconds, a wave of applause ripples through the gallery, small at first, then rising into something unstoppable. Caprio raises his hand. The sound fades. This is still a courtroom, he says gently. Justice doesn't need applause, it needs memory. He turns back to Hale. As for your case, the fine stands. But the greater cost isn't one you'll find on paper. Today, you've paid with something rarer, your illusion of untouchability. Hale's eyes flicker, defiance melting into something else, something smaller. He sits in silence, staring at the polished floor. For the first time, he seems like a man aware of how fragile his empire really is. Caprio removes his glasses, sets them down carefully. Mr. Hale, I told you this wasn't about a parking ticket. It was about principle. And today, the principle wins. He turns toward the door, his voice quiet but resonant. I don't work for you, sir. I work for justice. The sound of his footsteps fills the room, a measured rhythm that echoes long after he's gone. When the door closes, no one speaks. Then, from the back row, a man whispers softly, almost reverently, "First time I've seen a rich man lose," and everyone walk out feeling like they won. The murmur spreads, gentle, reflective. No laughter, no celebration, just the rare stillness that follows when truth finally settles into its rightful place. Outside, the city hums as always, traffic, footsteps, distant horns. But somewhere inside that courthouse, something feels cleaner, lighter. Not perfect, but honest. A voice, older, thoughtful, almost like a closing narration, breaks the lingering silence. Justice doesn't shout. It doesn't bargain. Sometimes, it just stands there, quiet, steady, and looks a man in the eyes until he finally sees himself. Then, a soft click, the door to the courtroom closing, sealing the moment in memory. And for once, Providence feels like its name again, a place where grace, however rare, has found a home.